I'm Michelle.
And I'm Lucy.
Welcome to a special episode that we don't have an intro for. And today?
The Welsh Connection. But with no accents this time.
Oh,
I'm not doing any more accents.
I liked them.
But first, we have new patrons to thank. Jessica Storm Williams, Kaja, or Kaya maybe, but it's spelled with a J, Shailene Ouellette, and M94.
Ooh, thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jessica is on Discord quite a lot, so I know we know her. Okay, this is looking at the background of Wales based on Rhys ap Thomas's episode.
Which is rather important. I mean, this is the Welsh King.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And yeah, we wanted to see whether he did anything to improve things for the Welsh.
Doubt it. I mean, he did spend most of his time in France and Burgundy.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how Welsh he felt, really. I mean, Jasper might have been drumming into him. They might have made him sing Men of Harlech every morning or something.
Yeah, that's true.
And eat soda bread. The Welsh, according to the Welsh, were Britons. They didn't like the name Welsh because it means foreigner.
Ah. And no,
which is just plain rude.
Yes, because they are the originators there. They are Britons. Or Britons.
Yeah. Unlike in England, where in 927 several Saxon lands amalgamated under one ruler, Wales didn't do that. They remained disparate domains, and they saw themselves as separate from the English, but not a whole entity in themselves.
Really?
Although they saw themselves as the Britons, they didn't feel they lived in a specific area that we would now call Wales. It was made up of, like France was made up of different places, and Italy, of course. The march, that area along the Welsh-English border, came about when William the Conqueror captured the area, but couldn't make any more inroads than that. Maybe he just thought, that's enough. You know,
we're losing.
I can't harry the north as well as this.
Yes, I need economy somewhere. I need to have people being able to produce food and, not die from starvation for the next 10 years.
And I'm not Hermione Granger. I can't do several things at the same time.
I would love that. I would love having one of those.
The march came from the Norman French word march, meaning boundary.
Yes, so we should say that there are the Welsh marches and there are also the Scottish marches.
Yes, the reason for having a special place is so that you can people it with violent types who will keep the Scottish and Welsh in their place. More successfully the Welsh than the Scots, I think, but not that successfully.
No, not at all successfully, I don't think. And it's horrid. We did... Who did we do? I'm trying to remember. Which Marcher Lord in Scotland was even given the ability to call for a war against Scotland without going through Henry? It was somebody I covered. It wasn't Thomas Stanley, I don't think. I don't remember. But it was Bishop Fox. Right.
Oh, right.
It was the bishop that was fighting. Yeah. Dear.
All right. The only person I could think of was Henry Percy up in that direction.
Yeah. So the Marcher Lords have higher powers of independence when it comes to battling. They don't have to ask permission from the king. They're there. Their job is to fight.
They're deliberately chosen because they've got experience with colonisation as well.
Yes. Which is another horrid thing.
Yes, it really is.
Go take over them.
And Welsh law was replaced by this rather more ad hoc feudal rule. As you say, they could do what they liked.
Yes. They did have some limits, but not nearly enough, I don't think.
No, not nearly enough.
Yeah.
About the only person the Welsh united to fight against was Bad King John. I always think of him as Bad King John because when I was a child I had a history book and there was a picture in it and it said underneath, Bad King John died of eating too much. And that, obviously they felt that was all you needed to know.
Was he the Serpent of Lampreys?
No.
What was he the Serpent of?
I don't know. There's Emperor Frederick was the surface of cold water and melons.
Yeah.
Which seems very unlikely. Unless he was desperately thirsty and drank loads and loads of cold water, and you shouldn't do that if you're very thirsty.
You can overhydrate yourself. I did it. What did Bad King John die of? Dysentery. No, I don't want the real one. I want what they said he died from.
Well, no, Bad King John died of eating too much.
Yes.
That's all you need to know.
Yes. But now I want to know who died of a surfeit of lampreys. Oh, it was King Henry I was the lampreys.
Ah.
Okay.
Well, John planned to invade Wales, but his daughter warned him, because the daughters are always much more intelligent than the fathers. Think of Margaret of Austria.
Yes.
She said, actually, Dad, you're not very popular with either the Welsh or the English, so... or indeed anybody.
Can you imagine having that discussion? Dad, nobody likes you.
No one likes you at all.
At all.
Please don't antagonise them any more than you've done. So, luckily for the Welsh, he changed his mind, which was probably the only sensible decision he ever made in his life. There were 3 clauses in the Magna Carta that related particularly to the Welsh. 1, any lands and liberties unlawfully taken from Welshmen were to be returned.
Oh, that's nice.
Nice.
Yes.
2, any English lands stolen by the Welsh were to be returned.
Okay.
And 3, any Welsh hostages that had not yet been hanged by the English king were to be released.
Oh, geez.
Which is really tough on the ones which have been hanged by the English king.
Yeah, that's dire.
Yes, there's probably one still hanging there, just in the throes of hanging. And they get to see someone rushing in saying, it's okay, you've all been reprieved.
But except he's already been hung, so just complete this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point taking him down. He'll have a really sore neck.
Oh, God.
Oh. In 1218, there was a peace conference, and Prince Llywelyn, obviously Welsh, was invited. In return for doing homage for the young English king, that's Henry III, not the surfeit of lampreys, Llywelyn was recognised as the overlord of his fellow Welsh princes.
Oh, that never goes well.
I don't know how much they were told about this, the other princes.
But the thing is that you're now pitting them against everybody else, and now they have a single person within range of their military to go after.
Also, I would have thought it would quite help the English that the Welsh were a disparate lot under different chieftains.
Yeah, because then they wouldn't join together to fight you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, start putting them under one umbrella.
Yeah.
And you're setting them up as a...
Yeah. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
No. Well, luckily, Llywelyn's capitulation to the English was very short-lived. Very short-lived.
You know what? Everybody hates me now.
Yes.
I'm going to fight you and get everybody liking me again. Thank you.
I don't think I like that, yeah. Well, in fact, they, quote, burst forth from their hiding places like rats from their holes and spread fire and devastation, unquote. Don't choke on your tea.
Thank you.
So obviously that was the English. I mean, the other Welsh people wouldn't refer to them as coming out like rats from their holes.
Oh, Jason would love this episode. He can't stand rats.
Yeah. When Henry III's chief judicia started to build a castle in Montgomery, Llywelyn's men pulled it down.
Oh.
So the judicia ordered that captives should be beheaded without trial and their heads sent to the king. I don't know why they always think the king wants these things. And this naturally incensed Llywelyn, and so it went on. So year after year, decade after decade, century after century.
Never stops.
Well, yeah, and even when there's an attempt at reconciliation, it's so short-lived. Anyway, that's pretty much the Anglo-Welsh relations in a nutshell. General mistrust interspersed with violence, culminating in the Owain Glyndwr rebellion.
You should have listened to your daughter. Please. Come on.
Well, I don't know, did Henry III have a daughter or indeed Prince Llywelyn? We don't know. The years following the Owain Glyndwr rebellion were hard on the Welsh. Parliament passed draconian laws on them, partly as a punishment for rebelling, and partly to cow the population so they wouldn't rebel again.
That never works. It just delays it.
I don't know, it depends how hard you clamp down, I suppose, doesn't it?
Leave no one behind?
Well, yes. The Welsh countryside had been battered by war. Fines were levied across the board, regardless of whether those fined had been in the rebellion or not. I suppose that the idea of that is that the people who haven't been, then feel really resentful of people who have. Possibly more resentful than they would of the English actually taking the fines. Maybe you're looking very, very doubtful.
But to me, it's just, it doesn't matter who gets it. You're fining me. I'm not helping. I'm not help. Oh, I can't speak now. I'm not happy.
Yeah, not happy. Well, they couldn't take up the offices of bailiff, mayor, sheriff or constable. They couldn't bear arms. They couldn't buy land in towns or gather in public.
Which is just good. You can't even gather in public.
No.
How do they go to church? Is church exempt?
One at a time.
Oh, gosh. You do the sermon you got a maximum of 3 people. So you can do the sermon, 150 times today?
Yes.
Make
and
it a
again
short
next Sunday.
one. God bless everything. Done.
Yes. God bless us, everyone. Anything they had managed to get to improve their lot was now taken away.
Jeez.
So it wasn't surprising that some decided to leave Wales and start a new life. And one of those was Owain ap Meredith ap Tudor.
Ah, the sexy one.
The sexy one, yes. His father, Meredith, had been outlawed after the Glyndŵr rebellion. That was pretty much an end to any influence the Tudors might have had. All except a distant cousin who had made his peace with Henry IV. And so, once the dust had settled, he was able to buy up Tudor property of the family members who'd been outlawed. And I presume that's the property that was later given to Sir Rowland of Elveal.
That's not okay.
Henry VII's illegitimate son. Do you remember he was given some Tudor lands in Wales? Well, so it all went back in the end.
Eventually, but only because Henry ended up getting the throne. If it hadn't been, it's just gone.
Yep.
Poof. Wow.
Well, it's gone to this other end of the Tudor line.
Oh, dear.
And they probably thought, well, let's keep it in the family. Hopefully they weren't thinking, let's bleed the rest of the family dry.
Ugh.
Anyway, it didn't help Owain because he was on the wrong side of the family. He was on the outlawed side. Mm-hmm. So, Owain ap Meredith ap Tudor crossed the border into England, where he became Common and Garden Owen Tudor. And by rights, he should have been Owen Meredith, because that was the name of his dad. And Tudor was his granddad, so the Tudors should be the Merediths. But they're not. And all down to somebody writing his name down wrong. The first thing we know about Owen, or think we know, is that he went to France with Sir Walter Hungerford. And we'll be coming across more Walter Hungerfords as we head through the Tudors. They're one of those families who thought, Walter, that's a pretty name, and they just stuck with it through thick and thin.
Oh, goodness.
I don't know if they had Walterette or something as the girls, but all the boys are Walter that we come across anyway. In fact, a Walter Hungerford fought under Henry Tudor at Bodsworth, and, as we've heard before, a Walter Hungerford was executed for buggery. And Owen might have seen Farley Hungerford Castle as his first home in England, because he moved in with the Hungerfords. I wish I'd known that, because I went to Farley Hungerford Castle a few weeks ago. Lovely. I would thoroughly recommend it. Very, very pretty.
Okay.
It could well have been through the Hungerfords that Owen got his entry into the royal court, because Hungerford was one of the executors of Henry V's will, and he was on the council for the regency of Henry VI. So it seems that it was through Hungerford that Owen met Catherine de Valois.
Oh, hey.
Yes. How are you doing? She was widowed at 20 and with a tiny son, Henry VI. And she looked after little Henry for the next 10 years, and he did spend a lot of time in her residence, which, as we know, is not always the case.
Nope.
She didn't become regent, since England didn't have much of a tradition of female regents, and also her brother was trying to expel the English from France, so they thought there might be a bit of a conflict of interest. So Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, and Bishop Henry Beaufort battled it out between them. And we heard in Jasper's episode, we might hear quite a bit of overlap with Jasper's episode, but I was thinking, well, that was 4 years ago for one thing. And secondly, we know these people now. We didn't know it when we did Jasper, because he was only our second person. Catherine wasn't allowed to marry except with the King's and the Regency Council's permission. In fact, it was a decree put out by the Regency Council. It wasn't the House of Commons. They weren't consulted. So when she ignored it completely, it wasn't the disaster for her and Owen that it might have been. If it had gone through Parliament, it might have been very different.
Okay.
They might have been clobbered with quite a big fine.
Oh.
The wedding must have been official and accepted, since when Richard III later poured scorn on Henry Tudor's background, he never questioned the validity of the marriage.
Ah.
And he would have done.
Well, you wouldn't need a dispensation. It's probably the only marriage you don't need a dispensation for.
Yes. Hang on, that's odd. I don't know you.
Yes. I don't know you, and we're not related.
Yes.
In any way,
I didn't
shape,
know
or
such
form.
people existed.
Makes you wonder why none of the Tudors were healthy. You're getting new genetics in there.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
There are 3 stories as to how Catherine and Owen became an item. Either she dressed as a maid, met Owen, he grabbed her and kissed her, injuring her cheek, which makes you think, what the hell was he doing to her?
Yeah.
And then later, when he saw the Queen with her cheek all bandaged up, he thought, yikes, and made a run for it. She called him back, and they fell in love.
I really liked that. Nobody's ever smacked me before.
Could you eat my face a bit more, please?
Gross.
Or he got drunk at a dance, fell in her lap, and they fell in love.
That is the most popular story.
Yeah. I don't know. Would you fall in love with a drunk in your lap?
No.
I'm not sure.
Don't think so.
Less colourful, but more likely, is that Owen's knowledge of North Wales was called upon when Catherine received land there on her husband's death. And they fell in love. Polydore Virgil said that Catherine, quote, being young in years, she was of less discretion to judge what was decent for her estate, unquote.
Whatever.
Well, for an official historian of the Tudors, it was a dangerous point to make.
Yes.
She married a Tudor. She married beneath her. And secretly whispering, and all Tudors are the lowest of the low. Some people have speculated that their eldest son, Edmund, was in fact Edmund Beaufort's boy, not Owen's.
Oh.
And this is based mainly on the boy's name.
Right.
But for a start, do you name a child after an ex-boyfriend?
I don't know.
Edmund Beaufort might have been the boy's godfather, in which case he'd have been named after him.
Yes, the naming makes sense then.
Yeah, as we saw with the Pastons, both the godfathers were called John.
John, and John.
But the boy was born near the shrine of St Edmund's the Martyr on St Edmund's Day. So really, what else were they going to call him?
Yeah. All the signs. There are plenty of omens.
It's a very English name for Welsh and French parents to give their child, though. But maybe they thought, well, he'll fit in better at school if he's got an English name.
Maybe.
Even odder is the name Jasper, because it's not known in England at this time. It was known in France, so perhaps that was Catherine's.
Well, yeah.
But
She is French.
yeah, it's Persian, apparently, in origin.
Really?
And it's something to do with having red hair.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, a jasper stone is red, isn't it?
Yes.
I believe. And then the next one was Owen, which is more understandable.
Owain.
Owain. Well, they're in England. Just Owen. Not Orion.
I
Orion.
don't like that at this time. I want to be called by my name, not by what you think my name is. It's like trying to research Juana. Joanne.
Joanna.
Joanna. Juana. Juanina I found in one place. And I was like, Juanina?
Joanna.
When I saw that, I was like, I don't have any trust in what you've written whatsoever.
It's funny, one little thing can put you off, can't it?
Yeah. Really? Really? Was this you honestly thinking that was one of her versions of her name, or did your editor just miss a spelling mistake?
Yeah, as soon as I saw Elizabeth Woodpile, I thought, no, I have no trust in you as a historian.
Yep.
And certainly not as an editor. When Catherine made her will, the only mention of Owen and the boys was rather oblique. She asked Henry VI if he'd oversee the, quote, tender and favourable fulfilling of mine intent, unquote.
Education and raising.
It's lucky he knew what she was talking about, because I wouldn't have known.
Oh, okay. I've seen that in a couple of other wills. That just means education and raising. But it doesn't imply, that is interesting. In the wills that I have read with that in, it does not imply marriage or money. It's only implying raising and education.
Well, I felt it was a message to her son, Henry, to say, look after your brothers, would you?
Yeah, please. Please, yes.
Do the decent thing.
And I'm including everything, not just raising and education, please.
Well,
he was very fond of them, which is a surprise.
Yeah.
Unless he felt so isolated.
Yeah. And they were family.
Yes.
He didn't have any more family, did he? Mm-mm. Catherine died in 1437 at the age of 35. Gosh. And despite the fact that she'd been described as being unable, quote, to control her fleshly passions, unquote, with relation to her marriage to Owen, her son Henry had written on the tomb, quote, a perfect flower of modesty, unquote.
Aww.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Again, no mention of Owen and the boys. Secret family. In 1502, Henry VII ordered the Lady Chapel in Westminster Abbey, where Catherine lay, should be pulled down and rebuilt. And Catherine was moved. And by a strange quirk of fate, when the chapel was finished in the early years of Henry VIII's reign, instead of being decently buried there, Catherine's coffin, which was thoroughly worse for wear by this point, was left lying on the floor.
Open, so people could see her.
Yeah, and it stayed there, as we heard in Jasper's episode, for so long that Samuel Pepys was able to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, how sick is that?
She was eventually interred, but in the Percy family vault. But then, apparently her body fell foul of students of Westminster School who, quote, amused themselves tearing it to pieces, unquote.
What is wrong with people?
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know why we even bother worrying about what's wrong with people, because it's everything we talk about is so far from my ability to understand.
Okay behaviour.
In 1878, she was finally buried next to her first husband, Henry V. But she'd been on quite an adventure up to then. But again, her epitaph makes no mention of Owen and the boys. Anyway, back to 1437. Owen, realising he was vulnerable without Catherine, started heading back to Wales.
Yeah.
He reached Daventry in the Midlands when he got a message that the king would like a little word.
Oh dear.
He refused to go back unless he could be guaranteed that he could, quote, freely come and freely go, unquote.
Just run. Don't make conditions. Nobody follows these conditions. Just run. I know that if someone in the government says you have to come here, I'm going to be like, no, I don't think so. I'm not even going to reply to you. I'm just going to disappear.
I didn't get the letter.
Yes. We're having yet another postal strike, maybe. It never got here.
Well, he couldn't deny it because Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, was sent to assure him of safe passage.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm here to make sure you come back.
Oh.
Well, he set off to London, where instead of presenting himself to the king, he asked for sanctuary in Westminster Abbey. He may have gone there to pay his respects to his wife's tomb. Luckily, he was quite decent then. He wasn't sort of flomped out on the floor.
Oh, my
God! He hadn't seen her since she entered Bermondsey Abbey when she was ill.
Oh.
So he might have gone to say goodbye. And then he did go before the king. And he said he'd done nothing that should offend Henry. He was his true liegeman, and the king had been, quote, evilly informed of him, unquote. And then he left. I don't know what the king said. The way it was written in this book, it sounds as if the king just sort of stood there open mouthed, and he said, I've done nothing wrong, I'm off, and then wandered off. And then Owen headed back towards Wales thinking, well, that didn't go too badly.
Yeah, that went well.
And then he was arrested. All his possessions seized, and he was thrown into Newgate jail. And Newgate was one of the worst ones.
Yes, it was. Festering is one of the words was used to describe it. That's never a good word.
I think it carried on festering until Dickens' day as well. This was on the council's say-so. I don't know what the king thought about it.
Maybe he didn't know at all. Yeah. They just didn't tell him. By the way, we've arrested and thrown in prison your stepfather.
That we promised safe passage to.
Well, we gave him safe
passage.
Or
you promised safe passage
We waited until he got somewhere else, so he had safe passage.
Yeah. Well, the council met to work out how they were going to spin this, so it didn't look as if they'd violated the terms of safe passage. And several of our old chums was there. Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, Walter Hungerford, one of the many Walter Hungerfords, and Mr. Tiptoft. Their conclusion was that for Owen to have demanded safe conduct from the king was odious, and therefore didn't count.
Doesn't matter if the king said yes. It's still not going to happen.
Yeah, who did he think he was? Jumped up little Welsh oik.
Oh, gosh.
Owen obviously didn't expect a fair hearing, since in 1438 he broke out of jail, wounding a keeper in the process.
Oh.
Time and again we've come across the idea that people could be fined for not doing their job properly, and letting prisoners escape, for instance, was one of them. But the sheriffs were forgiven for this because Owen had escaped, quote, deceitfully and subtly, unquote.
Okay.
So presumably he hadn't presented a petition requesting to escape, but had done it in an underhand and just plain sneaky way.
Yeah, but escape... You don't have to say escape is sneaky. Escape is sneaky. That is part of the word escape. You weren't let go.
The sheriffs couldn't be blamed for not spotting him sneaking. He did the whole sneaky walk business.
Giggling quietly as he went.
Yes. Unfortunately, and I do mean unfortunately, even though he wounded the keeper, I'm on his side, I have to say. Owen was caught by Baron Beaumont, and he, the Baron, was... Baron always sounds evil, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
He was rewarded with 20 marks, so he's a bounty hunter.
Oh.
Yeah. So I wonder if he had a mullet, like Dr. Bounty Hunter.
Ew.
He was then handed over to William de la Pole, and I don't think I'd want to be in that man's clutches. No. But luckily he was then passed to Walter Hungerford, and since he had been Owen's master when he first arrived from Wales, hopefully he was more compassionate.
Hopefully.
And then suddenly Thomas Stanley was being told to let Owen, quote, go at large, unquote.
Well, yeah.
So he's been sort of shoved from one person to another. There was a fine or a bond, I couldn't quite work out which, but I couldn't see where Owen would get the money to pay a fine, unless he could get people to stand surety for him, and I couldn't think he would. Yes. It was for £2,000, so it wasn't a small amount. And he was to appear before the king and council to answer, quote, what shall be laid before him, unquote. So the whole thing from first arrest to this point took 2 years. And he wasn't allowed to go back to Wales. I think their main fear was he might start an insurrection. So Owen stuck to the terms of his parole and was granted a pardon for all offences, and the fine was cancelled. And we don't know why he was forgiven, but it almost certainly came from Henry VI.
It would have had to. Nobody else wanted him or liked him, at least in power.
Can other people issue pardons? Does it have to come from the king? Maybe it does.
No, Parliament couldn't do pardons yet.
I don't think so. And we know which side the Welsh bards were on. Quote, his only fault was to have won the affections of the Princess of France, unquote. Oh, and he wounded that prison warder. But those were the only 2 faults. It wouldn't seem as if the future was that bright for Edmund and Jasper. Their mum was dead, their dad was in Newgate jail at that point. It wouldn't have been at all surprising if they'd just fallen through the gaps and we'd never heard of them again.
Yeah.
But they had something in their favour in that they were the half-brothers to the king.
Yes. Not step-brothers, half-brothers. That means something. I mean, even bastards mean something.
Well, first they were looked after by Catherine de la Pole, the Abbess of Barking, and the sister of William de la Pole. The boys were registered as Edmund and Jasper ap Meredith ap Tudor. No mention of ap Owen.
No.
That was completely crossed out.
Is it because he was in trouble with the law that maybe they distanced themselves from that specifically for that reason?
I don't know, maybe they wanted to separate the boys from this marriage, but at the time, still not quite sure what was going to happen to Owen regarding the marriage. So maybe to give the boys a sort of clean slate to start with, maybe they thought it was the best thing.
Mm.
But poor Owen does seem to be Tippexed out of everything, doesn't he?
Yes, erased.
Yes.
This person did not exist.
Their boys were 7 and 6, and being brought up in a Benedictine abbey doesn't seem to be a great hardship. They got roast beef 3 times a week, and not many people could claim that, I suppose. And being in an enclosed order meant the boys were kept away from the gossip of the court, so they wouldn't have had to listen to their father being maligned. And they may have been able to see him once they'd been pardoned. So you don't feel that they're being punished for their parents' misdemeanours?
No, which is nice, because a lot of people were.
Sins of the fathers.
Yep.
Well, Owen doesn't seem to have been in the doghouse anymore. He was one of the party that went over to France to pick up Margaret of Anjou. And by the time the 15-year-old Margaret came to England, Edmund and Jasper were the same age as her. And Jasper wasn't to know at this point that he'd be teaming up with Margaret to fight for Henry's right for the throne.
I don't know why I did that.
A bit of dramatic foreshadowing there, even though everybody already knows. The marriage between Henry and Margaret did nothing to stop the decline in English fortunes in France, and William de la Pole was one of those to be blamed. In fact, his supporter, the Bishop of Chichester, Adam Moleyns, was murdered by disgruntled sailors in Portsmouth. And I mentioned him partly because he was a Moleyns, one of the family that took the house from the Pastons.
Right.
No, you're looking blank. It was, I think it was the first people to take houses from the Pastons.
Which ones? Lots of people were fighting with the Pastons.
And Henry thought he was doing William de la Pole a favour by commuting the death sentence demanded by the council to 5 years of banishment. But we know he never made it across the channel, having had his head hacked off by more disgruntled sailors.
Yeah.
I don't know, why were the sailors so disgruntled?
I don't know.
I love that word, disgruntled.
Me too. There are a lot of fun words. That's one of the ones to say.
When Edmund and Jasper entered Henry's court, they could hardly have done so in more interesting times. The Jack Cade uprising had just been quelled. That's never a good word, is it?
No.
Richard, Duke of York, and the Duke of Somerset were at loggerheads over who should have ascendancy over the king.
Surprise, surprise.
In November 1452, Edmund was made Earl of Richmond and Jasper Earl of Pembroke. And he was to remain Earl of Pembroke for the rest of his life, if you were to ask Jasper.
Yes.
Edmund was to hold precedence over all other magnates and laymen of the realm, save for those holding dukedoms. So Edmund only has the 5 dukes and the king above him.
Oh.
That's pretty good, isn't it, for someone...
So is a marquess below an earl? I thought they were above an earl.
I thought it was above an earl, but
maybe there are no marquises at this time.
But it's only the people holding dukedoms, so marquess would come under the...
Yeah.
And others.
And others. Yeah.
And they were the first Welshmen to be inducted into the peerage. They were also recognised in Parliament as Henry's, quote, uterine brothers, unquote, which is a lovely phrase.
It's actually gross.
Well, it's a rather belated acceptance of the marriage of Catherine de Valois and Owen
Still
Tudor.
Gross.
Edmund was given fleur-de-lis on his coat of arms, a link to his French mother, and martlets, things like a swallow but with no feet.
I'm sorry.
As we heard...
Is this one of those fake ones?
We heard about it.
Oh, right.
In Rhys I think it was Rhys ap Thomas, which will have been the last one we put out. So we'll sound very forgetful, because this one will have gone out last week, but we did record it quite a long time ago. We've had 2 lots of flu since then. So.
Oh, goodness, yes.
So, yeah, Henry was known as the Swallow. And on top of that, they got lots of lovely land, giving an annual income each of just under £1,000. And the brothers got the joint wardship of Margaret Beaufort.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Baby. Here we go to one of the most cringeworthy moments in history for a woman. Anyway.
Yeah, it's Margaret Beaufort and Katerina Sforza. Not Katerina. Yeah, Katerina Sforza. Who, yes, sleepless nights over those.
Yeah.
Well, she had been the ward of William de la Pole, and he'd married her off to her son John. And it seems that Henry gave the wardship to Edmund and Jasper on the assumption that one of them would marry her, because the marriage to John de la Pole having been annulled.
Yeah, eventually, people.
Yes. And this would give them a line to the throne and maybe deflect the succession from Richard, Duke of York, should Henry and Margaret remain childless, which was looking as if it would be the case. But in fact, at more or less the same time, it turned out that Margaret was pregnant with Henry's child. Henry's. Definitely Henry's.
Whose?
I somehow doubt it. I don't think it was Henry VI's child.
No.
I don't think so. Apparently most historians think it was.
What?
Oh, yeah. I don't think it was. It's too... It was too lucky. Just as they were working out an alternative...
Well, the fact that he kept an eye and spied on people to make sure there was no naughtiness going on in the world, I have a feeling that he never did that.
I don't think so.
No.
Mm. But apparently we're in the minority. April 1453. At least one of the Tudor boys, probably Edmund, went with Margaret of Anjou on progress to Norfolk, where they met. It probably wasn't the highlight of their trip, but they did meet Margaret Paston, wearing borrowed jewellery.
Oh, yes.
They probably didn't come back saying, I tell you what, we met Margaret Paston.
And she's got borrowed jewellery. She is so poor.
What else happened? Oh, I can't remember. But we did meet Margaret. In the same year, Margaret of Anjou gave birth to a son, Edward, lovely boy, and the English lost Gascony and was just left with that little bit of land around Calais. Mm-hmm. And the shock sent poor Henry into a catatonic state. Richard of York was recalled to London, and the Duke of Somerset was sent to the Tower, apparently for his own protection.
Yes, for his own protection.
At the end of the year, the Duke of York convened a council to discuss the state of the finances. Not good, they concluded. Jasper was on the council, which was otherwise made up of York adherents, and presumably York wanted to extend the hand of friendship to the king's brother, and to keep them close, maybe.
Yes, to keep them close, that's it.
Especially if he were to try to make radical changes to the royal household spending. He sort of needed somebody in the royal household who might back him up. Nobody likes being told you're spending too much and you've got to tighten your belt.
Yeah.
Also at the meeting, among others, were the Earl of Warwick and the Earl of Worcester, a.k.a. Mr. Tiptoft. I mean, it's always good to know where he is. You don't want him lurking in the shadows, do you, no. Mr. Tiptoft?
No, definitely not.
By siding with York, Jasper risked falling out with Margaret of Anjou. She petitioned the council asking that she should be regent while Henry was ill, but they refused. You're a woman, they said.
Yeah.
On 27th March 1454, York was designated Protector and Defender of England, and it was assumed he'd have this role until Prince Edward came of age. And quite honestly, it would have been better if he had.
Yes.
Although everyone at the time at least feigned joy when the king recovered. But they must have just thought, that's the last thing we need.
Here we go again.
Yeah, just getting things sorted. So by March 1455, York and his allies were out of court and Somerset was back in, nursing an immense feeling of bitter resentment.
Yes.
This would have put the Tudor boys, particularly Jasper, who'd sat on the council, in a difficult position.
Yeah.
It could imply to Henry that they had sided with York, which they had when he was the only choice.
Well, he also did good for the country.
He did. Yeah. York mobilised troops not to depose the king, as he strenuously pointed out, But to get rid of Somerset, there was a confrontation at St Albans, and the Yorkists were victorious, partly through cheating, as they pounced when the Lancastrians weren't ready. And that's not on. I mean, you've got to wait for the other lot to get ready.
No, you don't.
I mean, there's no point just arriving on centre court at Wimbledon and bashing the balls into the thing before your opponent's turned up and saying, I appear to have won.
Yeah, but you don't have to wait for them to get ready. You just wait for them to show up and start taking it. Because they didn't come all as one mass.
No.
They showed up in spurts. So you could take out this group and then this group and not wait for them to get everybody together. And then, yes, you have one. And it was quite clever to do so.
Well, it's not cricket, is it? Anyway, now Jasper's links with the Yorkists might have saved him. I don't know whether he was doing a Stanley and thinking, I'm just going to keep foot in both camps just to be on the safe side, or whether he was just going with the flow. Well, Henry's ill, I've got to go with York. Oh, Henry's better.
I got to go with Somerset.
I'm his brother. Yeah. York knelt in front of the king and claimed to be his true liegeman, although given that he was surrounded by the mutilated corpses of Henry's men and Henry himself had been injured, that must have sounded a bit hollow.
Yeah.
I don't mean you any harm. Ow!
Yeah, he was just sitting under a tree, wasn't he? Henry VI.
I think so. I think it was this one. He got a hit in the ear or something. Yeah. Or perhaps he didn't. Perhaps he only pretended. Anyway, enough of that. They all re-entered London, but it was obvious Henry was being guided by York and Warwick.
Guided. That's a very gentle way of putting it.
Yes. In July, Parliament opened and the responsibility was placed firmly on Somerset, who had died in battle, so was in no position to complain. It was all his fault, apparently.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, a lot of it was, I think.
It actually was.
Yes. Also, plans were set to restrict Margaret of Anjou's dower and any money going to the Tudor brothers and grants to other lords, because they were trying to save money. They had to.
They were broke.
Yeah, they really were. Mm-hmm. Henry was just handing out
money
presents
everywhere.
to everybody.
Yeah, that's why York was doing so well. He took back all those wards. Yes. They go, hey, we can feed people again. Awesome.
Anyway, that's what's been going on in England, but we're looking at Wales. Quite a detour there, but we sort of had to know what's happening at Packen's HQ to find out what effect it has on Wales. Edmund hadn't attended Parliament, but we know that was because he'd been sent to Wales, where law and order had broken down as the deputies who'd been left in charge while the English governors were distracted in England had embarked on a spree of extortion and corruption. And prominent among these deputies was Griffith ap Nicholas. Griffith hadn't enjoyed the regime under the Duke of York.
Nope.
He'd had to concede power to Jasper Tudor as Earl of Pembroke. And it was made very clear to Griffith that the days of a free-for-all, or free for Griffith, in Wales were over. And the same went for his two sons, Owain and Thomas. He had been sponsored by the Duke of Somerset. And after St Albans, obviously the plug had been pulled on that, given that the Duke of Somerset was now dead.
Dead, yes.
Yes.
Messily dead.
Now York was keen to send someone to Wales who would assert the interests of the crown, and that person was Edmund Tudor, who was more likely to have the interests in the crown at heart than the brother of the king. And it also helped that Edmund was Welsh, or Welsh-ish, half Welsh. Just prior to heading off to Wales, Edmund and Margaret Beaufort were married, and soon after, Margaret conceived her son Henry, and we'll gloss over that bit of unpleasantness, I think.
Yes, please.
Griffith wasn't at all impressed by Edmund Tudor. It wasn't as if he was the Earl of Pembroke. He was the Earl of Richmond in Yorkshire. What authority could he expect to have over a man who had carved out an empire in North Wales? And by July 1456, the two were said to be, quote, at war greatly in Wales, unquote. Edmund managed to recapture Carmarthen, the centre of royal government in Wales. But it's I don't know whether he was sent to Wales to be at war. Yeah, you're meant to sort things out, and suddenly you're at war.
Yeah, havoc and war.
Back in England, Margaret of Anjou seems to have persuaded Henry to order York to resign the protectorate. York was out, Margaret and the Lancastrians strengthened their bases in the Midlands. York did the same in Wales, where he had land.
Yeah. How could you not see that a war was coming?
Yeah.
And that it was going to continue? Civil wars are never quick.
No. Well, the Lancastrians held sway in Wales. Jasper had Pembroke. The king himself had Cibweli as part of the Duchy of Lancaster. And the king's cousin Buckingham had Brecon, Hay and Newport. This probably only mean anything to people who know about Wales. But Richard of York had vast tracts of land in northern Wales. Also he had allies in the Herbert and Vaughan families. And his ally Warwick had lands in South Wales. So between them, they felt they could squash the Lancastrians.
No, they are unsquashable.
Yeah, you squidge one end and they just spurt out the sides.
Like toothpaste.
Well, York particularly made use of the Herberts to home in on Edmund Tudor, particularly Sir Walter Herbert and his father-in-law, Sir Walter Devereux. There was a rumour that one of the Herberts, Richard, had been gathering troops to kill the king. In August 1456, Herbert and Devereux were mustering men, 2,000 of them, and they headed for Carmarthen. When Edmund had gone to Wales, he wouldn't have been expecting to fight armies.
No.
He was there to crush corruption, and so it wasn't long before the Yorkists stormed Carmarthen Castle and took Edmund prisoner. Herbert and Devereux somehow managed to get their mitts on the seal of the Chamberlain of South Wales and set themselves up as a royal commission, acting, as they said, on behalf of the Duke of York.
That's not a royal commission. That's a ducal commission.
Yeah, I was going to say royal commission. This meant they had, or said they had, the right to try prisoners. Edmund was held until November, when he died. We don't know what Herbert and Devereux would have done with him if he hadn't died, whether they would have executed him. You'd think they would stop at executing the king's brother, but if one of their brothers was planning to execute the king himself...
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Maybe not.
And they've imprisoned the king's brother, so... Well, it's usually said Edmund died of plague, but we just don't know what went on in that prison. He could have died of anything, really.
No, and I've been watching this listening to this absolutely fantastic myths of... Hold on, I will pull it up, because it's... If you guys get a chance to listen to it, she is fantastic. It is Dorsey Armstrong, Medieval Myths and Mysteries, and she's on Audible. And she's talking about the plague. One, they didn't call it the plague, but the plague encompassed so many different diseases.
Everything. Yeah, everything.
We always think of it just the Black Death.
I think it just meant illness, didn't it?
Yes.
Illness that might well kill you.
Yeah, it was illness that spread fast.
Yeah. And
killed. So, yeah, sweating sickness was one of them. Malaria, they counted for a while. Tuberculosis, the pneumonic tuberculosis that was highly contagious. Yeah.
Well, Herbert and Devereux were later exonerated of being complicit in Edmund's death. However, they were imprisoned for robbing, beating, maiming and killing the king's subjects. Just not that particular king's subject.
Goodness.
Herbert was bailed and hightailed it back to Wales, where it was business as usual. And they hadn't even got Edmund there to sort them out anymore. To try and lure him over to the Lancastrian side, Herbert was told that he would be pardoned if he came before the king and swore loyalty, which he duly did.
Of course you would. I won't be killed? Of course I will do that.
And with Herbert's pardon, the investigation of Edmund's death was closed. That was it. Okay, you're on our side now. So obviously, if it turns out you did kill him, we don't want to know. Edmund was buried in a Franciscan monastery church. Margaret Beaufort did intend that his remains should be moved to Bourne Abbey in Lincolnshire, where she was going to build a proper tomb and chantry. But what with all the excitement of intriguing to get Henry on the throne and then being mother of the king, she didn't quite get round to this.
No, she was a very, very busy woman.
But Henry VII did assign £43 10 shillings, quote, for the making of a new tomb for our most dear father, unquote. And the person he assigned to that commission was Rhys ap Thomas.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And he's still in his tomb, although the tomb has been moved to St David's Cathedral. And the poet we came across last week, Coffey, said that Wales without Edmund was like a hearth without smoke.
Aww.
Which is odd, because he'd only been there for a few months and he spent most of that time in prison.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he was talking about, really.
No.
Still, he's a poet. I mean, he's meant to go a bit over the top, isn't he?
That, and if he praises this person, he'll get money from the king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're very cynical today.
Sorry.
Perhaps he just likes a nice poem. When he heard of his brother's death, the first thing Jasper did was to bring Margaret Beaufort to Pembroke Castle, where she could be protected.
Yes.
And where 3 months later Henry was born.
In a very, very uncomfortable delivery where both mother and child were expected to go.
Yeah. And he was probably christened in the fairly unassuming church of St Mary's.
Is it still there?
Yeah.
Oh.
But, I mean, it's a nice church. I've looked at pictures of it, but it's a church for a future king to be
Yes, it's not Westminster
in.
Abbey.
No.
No.
She didn't do... Oh, who was it? Ferdinand of Aragon's mum. She refused to have him baptised until he was made the heir and he could be baptised in the proper cathedral.
Scary. I remember you talking about that. I'm like, that's so dumb. He's going to go to hell. Children died all the time.
Up until now, Jasper's main responsibility had been at court, but with Edmund gone, he now shifted the emphasis to Wales, as indeed were we. He had been a conciliatory character between Henry and the Duke of York, but Herbert and Devereux were York's men, and they just killed his brother. The situation was very different now, and I wonder if we can look at the death of his brother as an explanation for Jasper's single-minded Lancastrianism.
Probably.
A bit like John de Vere when his father and brother were executed.
Yes.
And he just thought, right.
Yeah. There is no way I'm changing sides now. I couldn't. Yeah.
Yeah, the gloves are off.
Yep.
However, his naturally conciliatory nature meant that rather than his brother's approach of going head-to-head with Griffith ap Nicholas and his sons Owain and Thomas, Jasper sought friendship with him. And this, and the fact that Margaret of Anjou had pardoned him, meant that Griffith chose to lean heavily over to the Lancastrian side.
It's logical.
But it worked.
Yes.
Be nice.
Yeah.
And people will often do things for you. So
yes.
Yeah, I'll join your team. Jasper was given the constableship of Carmarthen, Aberystwyth and Carrickkennen, but he had to pop back to London on the 25th of March, 1458 for... Can you guess?
No.
Well, that's an honest answer. The Love Day.
The Love Day, right.
And to show how well that worked, 9th of October, 1459, the Battle of Ludford Bridge. And it saw York, Salisbury and Warwick for the Yorkist side and the king himself for the Lancastrians. And this panicked a lot of the Yorkist soldiers, because it's one thing to fight against the king as a distant, nebulous entity,
yes,
but quite another to face him in the field.
Yes. Well, you wouldn't be facing him in the field. He'd be on a little tent. They've made him a picnic over there.
Yes.
You can see him, and there's a big flag with a crown.
It just felt more treasonous, knowing he was there.
Very much so.
And they accepted the king's pardon. York, Salisbury and Warwick fell back to Ludlow under the pretence of regrouping. But, in fact, they were abandoning their remaining troops and getting the hell out of there. York headed to Ireland, and Jasper would have been the one to pursue him through Wales on the way. And York left his wife, Cecily Neville, and 3 of his children, George, Richard and Margaret. York, Warwick and Salisbury were formally attainted, and Jasper got Denbigh Castle, York's stronghold in Wales. It's so backwards and forwards, isn't it? Oh, it's mine. No, it's mine. It's mine. No, you can. Yep. Jasper was given the commission to arrest 7 men in Wales, and investigating this with him were his father, Owen Tudor, and Owain and Thomas ap Griffith. He was also given the right to pardon or execute people as he saw fit, but only Welsh people. The king retained the right to say what happened to English or indeed Irish people.
Gosh, that's creepy.
And Jasper was given 1,000 marks to cover his expenses in crushing Yorkists in Wales. Don't know where they got 1,000 marks from.
I don't know either. From the people they were executing?
Possibly. Well, I'm not going to cover the Wars of the Roses again. We've done it so many times. And we're sticking with Wales. But we know that York came back to England and put his hand on the throne, and everyone went, ooh. And he realised he'd misinterpreted the situation in a big way. But Henry VI agreed to an Act of Accord which said that York could be king after him, thus disinheriting his son Edward. And I don't think that was a bad thing. I mean, Margaret of Anjou might not agree. But we know that York was doing a good job when Henry was ill.
Yeah.
And we know that Prince Edward was a right little shit. So out of the two of them, I know who'd I'd choose. The immediate effect it had on Jasper was that York wanted Denbigh Castle back, and he sent Jasper a message telling him to surrender it. And the same went for all the other Lancastrian-held castles in Wales. Devereux and Herbert were given, quote, full authority and power, unquote, to take Denbigh. Jasper hid Queen Margaret and Prince Edward in Harlech Castle and then bundled them onto a ship and sent them to Scotland. Remember, this isn't when Henry's not on the throne. He's still on the throne. It's just he's said that York can be king after him.
Yeah.
So it's a bit much for York to start dictating to the king's brother, get out of that castle.
Yes.
The Act of Accord was never going to mollify York. He would have to wait for Henry VI to die before he could get the throne, and Henry was 10 years younger than him.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there might have been a way to help him on his way.
Speed it along.
Also, Margaret of Anjou was having none of this disinheriting her son malarkey, and she wasn't going to leave things alone. When York got chopped down as he rode out of Sandal Castle, Jasper realised that war was on. He probably spotted that before. There was no way York's son, the Earl of March, was going to take that lying down. The trouble was, March was between Jasper and his troops, including Owain and Thomas ap Griffith and Owen Tudor, and Margaret of Anjou's troops. That always seemed to happen. They never seemed to be able to get together to fight a proper battle. Edward, Earl of March, along with Devereux and Herbert, were near Ludlow when Jasper's troops came across them. And although he hadn't got Margaret's troops, Jasper had to array his forces for battle. And unfortunately, there were 3 suns in the sky, which was thought to be a very bad omen.
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
Well, Edward said no, it's a very good omen.
Yes.
And it turned out it was.
Yeah, it represents the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And that the 3 suns is a climactic
perihelion.
It's called a perihelion. Yes, so it's just the way the light reflects off of the atmosphere. So yes, it does exist. This is not one of those omens where everybody's like, a bald eagle did this. No, this actually can occur. Yeah,
it was really there. And Jasper obviously thought it was a bad omen, and Edward thought it was good, and Jasper lost, and Edward won. Well, Jasper was forced to flee, and as he did so, he became separated from his father. Owen was caught by Roger Vaughan, an ally of Devereux and Herbert. When Edward, who'd just lost his own father, heard that Jasper's father had been caught, there was really only one outcome likely for Owen.
Yeah.
Like Anne Boleyn, Owen apparently expected a reprieve right up until the moment the blade entered his neck.
Really?
His head was set up in the market, where later a woman was observed brushing his hair and lighting candles around him.
Wow.
People said she was mad, but I felt that was quite an easy option.
Yeah.
So just saying, well, she's mad. She might have known him.
Yes. Or she might have actually just had compassion. People.
Yes. Yeah, I feel I'm a relatively compassionate person, but I'm not going to brush the hair of a disembodied head.
Yeah, that's true. But we also wouldn't have gone to witness executions on a regular basis.
Well, we might have done. We don't know what would have been like if that was the norm.
I would like to think that there were still kind-hearted people.
Edward, Earl of March, now looked to strengthen his... Just carrying on. He looked to strengthen his authority in Wales, and the obvious man to deal with that was Walter Herbert. His remit was wide-ranging, including taking Pembroke and Tenby from Jasper. They surrendered without much of a fight. In the north, one of the Yorkists given positions of authority was, here he is again, the Earl of Worcester, Mr. Tiptoft.
Mr. Tiptoft.
I don't remember even mentioning Wales when we did those 2 episodes.
I don't remember either, but he's everywhere. This is one of the reasons why I love the research.
Yes.
You'll get somebody who has completely, they said they found absolutely everything and they put it all in a book and you're like, okay, this is comprehensive. And then you start researching something else and you're like, wait a second. Why is he here?
You've missed out about 20 years of their life. Well, Jasper was on the run. He seems to have gone to Harlech Castle for a while, but other than that, we're not sure where he was. And luckily for him, Walter Herbert didn't know where he was either. There were just 2 places left in Lancastrian hands, Harlech, which would hold out for another 7 years, and Carrick-Kennen, being protected by Owain and Thomas ap Griffith. When Parliament was opened in November 1461, it was decided that the Lancastrians had usurped the throne in 1399.
Yes, let's go all the way back, which technically they kind of did. If you look at it legally, they actually rather did.
Well, they said that this made Edward the rightful king. But really, there are so many usurpations throughout history.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you could actually untangle it that much.
Well, I love that documentary right now that there's actually the real king of England was a guy in Australia instead of Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah, I wonder if Charles would just say, fine, take it.
Yes.
Inevitably, Jasper, along with many others, was attainted. He could no longer call himself the Earl of Pembroke, they said. But that didn't stop him. He lost his Knight of the Garter as well. There were only allowed to be 24 Knights of the Garter. And he got his when King Alfonso of Aragon died. And now the vacant place was taken by George, Duke of Clarence. We're looking at the Knights of the Garter on Patreon for our anniversary episode. When Herbert attacked Pembroke Castle, Jasper fled north. But for reasons known only to himself, he left his 4-year-old nephew, Henry, behind. It's possible he saw Edward IV's enthronement as temporary, so why drag the little boy on a long journey? He'd be coming back soon, surely.
I can understand that.
So Jasper had no title, no lands, no money, no family, no authority, no Henry. He was a Lancastrian rebel in a land that was well and truly Yorkist now. Herbert paid £1,000 for the wardship of the boy, including marital rights. Henry's mum had tried and failed to get the wardship.
Yes.
So Margaret Beaufort must have been worried sick that her little boy was in the hands of Herbert, since he'd been implicated in the deaths of her previous husband, Edmund Tudor, and his father, Owen.
You would just be... I'm surprised she managed to get through life with some semblance of sanity, honestly.
Well, perhaps those little glasses of Malmsey might have helped in the circumstances.
I'm saving an explanation of that for our redo.
The arrival of Lord Herbert must have been a shock for Henry. Henry had been born in Pembroke Castle, and it was sort of all he'd known. Suddenly this strange man turns up, scoops him up and takes him away. Whatever Herbert might have felt about Edmund Tudor, he didn't let this colour his treatment of Henry, though. Let's say that about him. Unfortunately, the only source we have for Henry's upbringing is Bernard Andre. And we didn't really believe a word of his. One good thing about William Herbert being Henry's ward is that he was Welsh, and he was a Welsh speaker. So Henry would have learnt Welsh in his household.
He was also reportedly a very kind man to Henry. Treated him actually as part of the family.
Yeah, he had quite a big family.
Yeah.
But this must have been quite handy for when Henry had to do his "Look How Welsh I Am" campaign later on. To say,
yes,
look, I speak the language.
Yes. Yeah, good point.
Henry was brought up with Edward's at least 9 legitimate children and 1 illegitimate son. And then 6 years later, another ward turned up, Henry Percy. Percy was 19, and I'm sure he must have discussed in his episode why a 19-year-old should be a ward. But I can't remember what became about it.
Yeah.
And was this shared history why Percy didn't feel able to fight against Henry at Bosworth? The Herberts did very nicely under Edward and rebuilt Raglan Castle to fit their new status. So Henry was living in luxury. Whether he saw it as a gilded cage, he would later say he had no liberty as a child. But honestly, which children at this age did have liberty?
None.
No.
None at all. Unless they're just equating liberty to being with your parents.
Yeah, but even if you're with your parents, you still have to follow the rules.
Yes. And quite often your parents shipped you out to somebody else to be educated. So
yes.
It's a weird sentence or statement.
Maybe he was thinking, I had no liberty as a child. I've got no liberty now because I'm stuck in Brittany.
Yeah.
Then I've got no liberty in France because it's all going wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to be able to say to him, don't worry, it's all going to work out.
Yeah. You just have to not starve in the meantime.
And don't fall into the hands of Richard III. In 1462, there was news of an uprising. Jasper and the Duke of Exeter in North Wales, Henry Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, Walter Hungerford and John Morton in East Anglia. All this was to be funded by Ferdinand of Aragon and the kings of Portugal, France and Denmark. John de Vere Sr. was to assassinate Edward IV, so surely nothing could go wrong. Well, it could if someone told Edward IV.
Thank you.
And this is why John de Vere, the gentle, benign father of our John de Vere, was executed, because we heard in de Vere's episode that he'd risen up against Edward completely out of the blue, having been apolitical up to that point. I hadn't read before that he was planning to assassinate the king.
No.
You can sort of understand Edward's reaction.
Yes.
You can't really ignore that, can you?
No.
Louis XI was prevailed upon by Henry VI, Margaret of Anjou and Jasper Tudor, all of whom were his first cousins, to stump up the money to get the Lancastrians back in power. And this was when not only Margaret of Anjou, but more shockingly, Jasper agreed to use Calais as collateral. Jasper and Margaret of Anjou sailed to northern England, where Jasper found himself being besieged in Pembroke Castle by the Earl of Warwick, who was determined to starve them out. So, not a great return on Louis XI's investment, I don't think. Did you manage to get back England? No, we got stuck in a castle.
Yes, we got a castle. A single castle. And it's damaged.
Yeah. Herbert was becoming too powerful for some people, namely Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick. He was annoyed at Herbert's influence in Wales when Warwick owned estates in Glamorgan. Also, Herbert had links to the Woodvilles. He'd married his son off to Elizabeth Woodville's sister Mary. When George Neville, one of the many George Nevilles, not the bastard but the Archbishop, was stripped of his chancellorship, it was Herbert who was sent to collect the seal from him. And Herbert was very keen that Henry Tudor and Henry Percy should be restored to their titles, because as wards they were worth a lot more when they were titled. And it didn't suit Warwick, since Richmond and Northumberland were in the north butting up against Neville territory. So Herbert's rise wasn't the only thing that pushed Warwick into rebellion, but it certainly added to his grievances.
Everybody has grievances. I understand.
I think Warwick had more than most, didn't he?
Yes, but he orchestrated his own grievances in a way because he was running roughshod. Like, if you don't get along with the person that you're trying to make king, of course eventually you're going to be shoved aside. There's got to be some point where you say, you know what, I could have done that better.
I don't think he ever saw Edward shoving him aside as a remotest possibility, did he? I mean, he needs me.
Yes. Yeah. Which is just blind willfulness, I think.
Yeah.
Ego. We're back to ego again.
Monstrous ego, yes. Meanwhile, over the Channel, Louis XI was horrified that the bond between his two enemies, England and Burgundy, had been ratified by the marriage of Margaret of York and Charles the Bold. Louis decided to give Edward something else to think about, so he brought Jasper in from the wasteland and told him, off you go, invade England again. That'll wipe the supercilious smile off Edward's face. Jasper started to do a few secret voyages, putting in Wales, making liaisons, collecting intelligence from Harlech Castle. And that's the only one still in Lancastrian hands, and then quietly sailing away. So there you go, look, James Bond, not Mr. Bean.
Nicely
intelligence.
Done. Nicely done.
In September 1467, Margaret Beaufort and her husband, Henry Stafford, spent a week with the Herberts and Henry. It must have been quite bittersweet for Margaret. She got to see her son, But she was staying with the man who contributed to the death of her husband and father-in-law.
But at the same time, most people didn't love their husbands. You didn't choose him.
She had no reason to love him.
No, not at all.
None at all.
He was a terrible man. Thank you.
Yes. But don't tell the boy.
Shh. Yeah.
The following year, Jasper was back. He marched across Wales, gathering supporters as he went, until he reached the Yorkist town of Denbigh.
Yes, and he actually gathered supporters.
He's gathered supporters.
Yep.
He knows how to do it.
Yeah.
And when he got to Denbigh, he plundered and razed to the ground. So, yeah, that's the way to get people on your side.
Yeah.
I don't know why he gathered supporters, if that was his plan.
I don't know.
Edward was furious and told William Herbert to array men and take Harlech back into the fold. And he did a pincer movement with his brother Robert, this is William Herbert, which proved too much for the garrison at Harlech, and they finally capitulated. But where was Jasper? As the song said, they seek him here, they seek him there.
They seek him everywhere.
He dressed as a peasant, hauled a bale of straw onto his back, and managed to evade all his pursuers. A bit more Bond-like behaviour.
I don't see Bond dressing as a peasant.
No, that's true. That's true. But the
Bond
only
would have
peasants who
seduced
drink
a
dry
woman.
martinis.
Yeah. Bond would have seduced a woman and just had her do the work.
Yes, true. Well, next time we hear of Jasper, he's back at the court of Louis XI. However, William Herbert was made Earl of Pembroke, and he's now the most powerful Welshman in Wales, which must have infuriated Griffith's ap Thomas. When Warwick and the Duke of Clarence invaded England in 1469, it was Herbert that Edward IV turned to repel the invasion with an army of Welshmen, and they marched towards Northampton and met Warwick and Clarence at Edgecote. Herbert's main problem came from his own side. His fellow commander Humphrey Stafford was annoyed about the accommodation for his men and had a massive sulk. Yes.
They can't see me stick my bottom lip out.
He refused to combine his men with Herbert's, so Herbert had to go it alone, which was a pity since Stafford was the one with the archers. Herbert's army panicked as the arrows rained down on them and fled the field, only to be cut down as they ran. Herbert was captured and brought before Warwick in Northampton. Henry Tudor, then aged 12, had been watching all this from the sidelines. I wish he'd left something, anything, just to tell us what he thought. It'd be nice.
It would be nice.
Warwick allowed Herbert to write to his wife, Anne, before sentence was carried out. So it's obvious what sentence is going to be carried out if they say you can write to your wife. In his letter, Herbert told Anne to marry their daughter Maud to Henry Tudor. And he was then executed. Herbert, obviously, not Henry Tudor, otherwise we've been telling people lies right from the beginning.
It wasn't the Tudors at all.
Well, it wasn't. It was the Merediths. We don't know what Henry thought of Herbert, again, whether he was resentful that he'd been sold off to this man, or whether he saw him as a father figure. You know, the first he'd have had, really, apart from Jasper, I suppose. The Welsh bards poured out their grief at the loss of Herbert, not least because a Welshman had been brought down by Northerners, which was unforgivable. When Margaret Beaufort heard of Herbert's death, she saw her chance to get her son back. Unfortunately, Edward IV had other ideas. Henry Tudor was to stay with the Herbert family. Margaret brought in Reginald Bray to search through the records and find a loophole in Herbert's wardship. And he went to Anne Herbert to discuss it with her, and this is when he took Henry a bow and arrows. Yeah, there you go. There you go, son. Go and shoot something. However, Warwick and Clarence's success was short-lived, and they fled back to France and made their bizarre alliance with Margaret of Anjou. When Warwick and Clarence, along with Jasper and John de Vere, an odd alliance, arrived back in England, it was Edward's turn to flee, along with Richard, Duke of Gloucester, and Anthony Woodville. Henry VI was taken out of the Tower and told he was king again. And it's not at all certain he knew what was going on, really. His already wavering mental state hadn't been helped by 5 years in prison.
No, and it wouldn't. Not there.
And this meant that Jasper was back on the winning side. And one of the first things he did was pick up his nephew, Henry Tudor. He was in Hereford, having been whisked away from the battlefield at Edgecott by one of Herbert's relatives. In fact, the whole Herbert clan went there, and Jasper went to Anne Herbert and explained that the situation had now changed, and whether she had any right to Henry or not, Jasper was taking him. And it must have been a strange reunion, since Henry had spent all his formative years with Jasper's enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Jasper and Henry went to London, where Henry Tudor met King Henry, who was so impressed by him that he told him that, quote, "we and our adversaries must yield and give over the dominion," unquote. Or possibly not.
Like that happened.
Henry spent a couple of weeks with his mother before he went with Jasper back to Wales. At the first Lancastrian Parliament, Jasper was reinstated as Earl of Pembroke. And he probably said, "No, it's all right. I've always been Earl of Pembroke."
We're fine.
Unfortunately for Henry Tudor, George, Duke of Clarence, had his earldom of Richmond and was allowed to keep it, presumably as a thank you for his help getting Henry VI back on the throne. Although, of course, as far as Clarence was concerned, that wasn't what he thought he was doing. He thought he was putting him on the throne, but oh well, bless him. Margaret Beaufort and her husband negotiated with Clarence, who agreed that Henry could have it after he died.
Isn't that so weird?
Well, Clarence was only 8 years older than Henry, so there might be a long wait.
Yeah.
And as, of course, there was a vat of Malmsey waiting for him somewhere. No, that's very unlikely. Jasper was granted the revenues of the Herbert estates, which must have been nice for him, but I did wonder what Anne Herbert was living on with all those children. He was given the remit to wipe Wales clean of Yorkist influence. Wales must be fed up. They must think, can't we just be Welsh? Do we have to be Yorkist or Lancastrian?
Everybody just leave us alone.
Yes. Anyway, Jasper should enjoy his time in the sun, because across the Channel in Flanders, Edward was plotting his return to power. In March 1471, he was back in England, and the following month he entered London, meeting no resistance, which is a bit of an anticlimax, really, isn't it, after all that? And he just walks in.
"Hello.
Honey, I'm home." Edward fought with Warwick and the Earl of Oxford in the fog at Barnet, and Warwick was killed. Edward then met Margaret of Anjou and her son at Tewkesbury, and Jasper hadn't been able to meet up with Margaret with his Welsh troops, and the Lancastrians were routed, and Prince Edward was killed. Roger Vaughan was sent to arrest Jasper, but somehow Jasper managed to turn the tables and he arrested Vaughan. We don't know how that occurred, but it's a bit like that when John de Vere was in prison and made his escape with his jailer. Imagine him looking round and saying, "What are you doing? I'm coming with you."
Yeah.
He berated him for his role in the death of his father, Owen, before beheading him. He then took Henry to Pembroke Castle, where they barricaded themselves in. When Morgan ap Thomas, the grandson of Griffith ap Nicholas, and presumably Rhys ap Thomas's brother, turned up at the castle, Jasper thought he'd come to help, since the family were Lancastrians. But no, Morgan was the son-in-law of Roger Vaughan, and Jasper had just cut his head off.
Yeah.
Morgan besieged Pembroke for 8 days, but then his brother Dafydd turned up. Jasper's heart must have sunk. There were more of them now. But luckily for him, Dafydd attacked Morgan, so while the two brothers were fighting outside the castle,
He ran away.
Jasper and Henry sneaked out the back door.
See, that's a Mr. Bean movement.
That's clever. While they were at Tenby, and actually I looked at pictures of Tenby, it looks like a really interesting place. There they learned that Henry VI had died of, quote, pure displeasure and melancholy, unquote.
Right.
There was nothing for Jasper now, so he and Henry headed across the Channel to the court of Jasper's cousin, Louis XI. But however, we know, or should know by now, that they were blown off course and ended up in Brittany, where they sought refuge from a community of Benedictine monks. Jasper then got in touch with Duke Francis. They were second cousins, on the basis that Jasper is related to absolutely everyone. We looked at Jasper's and Henry's life in Brittany in Jasper's episode, and it has nothing to do with Wales, so we'll skip over that. And we're going to rejoin the story when Henry set off for Milford Haven. It was the obvious place for him to land, and somewhere he'd be likely to get the most support. However, the nearest place to Mill Bay was Pembroke, where Richard III had a garrison, And then further inland there was Sir James Tyrrell and the Vaughan family, and none of them would be friendly to the Tudors. And, as we said last week at this stage, Henry wasn't sure of Rhys ap Thomas's political leaning. Richard had sent out a proclamation warning the people of Wales what terrible terrors Henry Tudor would bring down on the Welsh people. So Henry made certain that his men didn't bring down any terrors, terrible or otherwise. And in Henry's favour, we don't hear any stories of indiscipline. But then again, since he was the ultimate winner, I guess we wouldn't, would
No.
we? They pressed on fast, since it wouldn't be long before their presence would be reported to Richard. Also, Henry had just heard for certain that Rhys ap Thomas and John Savage had gone over to Richard's side. So I should imagine he was in a bit of a panic. Apparently it was round here.
I wish I knew. You've got those people that during these kind of things that are going, it's okay, it's fine, we'll do this, this, and this. There's those kind of people. And then there's those people that are running around going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do, what do I do? And I want to know which one he is.
I don't know. I see him as a warrior, but I see him as a sort of insular warrior who would sort of sit down and be very quiet and think, oh, good God, what do we do now? But he's not running about doing it. But I don't know why I've got this idea he's a warrior, because apparently he says he's not bothered about anything. I'm not bothered.
Oh.
Perkin who? No, I'm not bothered about him.
What?
And apparently it was around here that Henry was joined by Griffith Reid, who, if you remember, was the one who Rhys ap Thomas felt has usurped his position in Henry's affections, and so had him murdered.
Yes.
So it turned out that Reid was with Henry right from the get-go as soon as he landed in Wales, which is more than Rhys ap Thomas did, so no wonder he preferred Reid.
Yeah.
It just seemed to be sort of, I don't know, rather, Henry loves him more than he loves me.
Oh,
yeah.
Muffin.
At some point, Henry wrote a letter to an unknown recipient. I mean, unknown to us. I mean, he knew who he was writing to. He asks for, quote, the assistance of our loving and true subjects and the great confidence that we have to the nobles and commoners in this our Principality of Wales, unquote. And he claims to be, quote, delivering them from such miserable servitude as they have piteously long stood in, unquote. And it's hard to tell if that comment is to the Welsh people, saying he'll deliver them from the English, or whether he's saying that to all his subjects, saying he'd get rid of the tyrant Richard.
Oh.
But I assume the former, since he said they'd long stood in.
Yes.
And Richard hadn't been that long.
No.
But the Welsh had been punished for the rebellion of Owain Glyndŵr, so they had suffered piteous long.
Yes.
Again, you might think he would say that. He wants the Welsh people to join him and increase the size of his army.
Yes.
Since we're going for cynicism today. Tradition has it, which usually means it probably isn't true, that Henry met a prophet called Dafydd Llwyd. And Henry asked him whether he would win or not. And this threw Llwyd into a panic. What on earth was he to say? But his wife said, it's easy. You just tell him he'll have a great victory. If he does have a great victory, he'll remember you and be pleased. And if he doesn't, either he's getting out of Wales sharpish or he'll be dead. Either way, he's not going to be hammering on your door wondering what happened to his great victory.
Either way, you'll be fine.
Yes. Pull yourself together.
Maybe he is the one running around going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God.
Yes.
We're all going to die.
When they met Rhys ap Thomas, Henry, as we said last week, promised him political dominance over Wales. Jasper would have been part of the negotiations, so it's not as if Henry was saying, it's okay, Rhys, you can have dominance, just don't tell Jasper. It seems that Jasper was perfectly happy for Rhys to do the everyday governing of Wales. Everyone knew that Jasper was the head honcho, really. But, let Rhys have his little bit of power. Richard III was apparently furious when he heard that Rhys had betrayed him, not least because he'd been paying him a grant of 40 marks. Then they were joined by a whole lot of people, most of whom had ap in their name. The book I read had them listed, and I thought, that's a lot of people we've never heard of.
Oh dear.
So the Welsh are now piling in to support Henry, and it would have stirred the Welsh breast to see Henry marching past, flying the standard with the red dragon on it. At Tamworth, they were joined by Walter Hungerford, the great-grandson of the Walter Hungerford Owen Tudor had lived with when he first came to England. Bosworth. John de Vere was the ultimate leader on Henry's side, but the other leaders included lots of names we now know, but we didn't know when I did Jasper Tudor's episode. Gilbert Talbot. I think he's the grandson of the John Talbot who was imprisoned during the 100 Years' War in the battle where Sir John Fastolf was accused of cowardice. John Savage, the nephew of Thomas Stanley. John Wells, Margaret Beaufort's half-brother and later husband to Cecily of York. Edward Woodville, we obviously know. John Chain, he's the one who's 6'8". James Blount, the De Vere jailer who escaped with him. Thomas Arundel, we've come across several Arundels, they were a Cornish family. Richard Edgecombe, the one who threw his hat in the river.
Yes.
Edward Poynings, the one who never kept still for 5 minutes.
Never.
And Richard Guilford, apparently later to employ Alexander Simpson as a master spy, and the one who was caught with his hand in the till to pay off his debts. Strangely, there's someone who's not mentioned. It's Jasper Tudor. Neither Polydore, Virgil, nor the Crowland Chronicler mention him on the battlefield.
Oh.
He was in his 50s and they'd marched a long way on some difficult terrain, but you'd thought he wouldn't want to miss it, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Everything has come to this point.
Yeah.
And one thing we know for certain, it was Rhys ap Thomas who killed Rich III. Or some other Welshman.
Right.
After it became clear that Richard was dead, the troops threw down their weapons and were allowed to leave the field. It must have been a very strange moment. As they're busy, 1 minute they're slashing away at each other, and then suddenly everyone shouts, "Stop! Stop, stop, stop! He's dead!"
Wait a second. Yeah, we're good.
By rights, Henry shouldn't have won. He was outnumbered, and he had a pretty tenuous right to the throne, really. If Richard hadn't made himself unpopular, Henry wouldn't have had a hope in hell. But any Welshman could have said why Henry was victorious. He was the Mab Darogan, the son of prophecy. And if you wanted proof that he was the son of prophecy, well, he just won the Battle of Bosworth. Obviously, he's the son of prophecy.
Oh, my goodness. What circular reasoning is that?
That was my circular reasoning. In what ways did Henry's Welshness impinge on his rule? In recent years, he's been accused of using his Welshness as superficial propaganda. The dragon, the whole King Arthur bit, being descended from Cadwallader. Did he actually improve the lot of the Welsh people? Nathan Armin says that with all the problems he had to face, not least with the various pretenders, it wasn't surprising he might have left the most peaceful and obedient part of his kingdom on the back burner for a while. He'd already won over the Welsh. It was the English he needed to convince now. And how much was it endearing him to the English that he chose the dragon and other Welsh paraphernalia? In many ways, he was risking alienating his English subjects with his superficial Welsh propaganda. The makeup of Wales was different to England. It was a series of disparate areas, about 40 of them held by English lords. Following the Wars of the Roses, so many of these lords had died that swathes of Wales then belonged to the Crown. Henry's policy of keeping land for the Crown rather than giving it away as a reward meant that larger and larger areas came under royal control. So he was able to give more autonomy in lands he owned, Wales.
Okay. At least that's something.
Yeah. 1489, Henry made his son Arthur Prince of Wales and bolstered up the Council of Wales, much, as we saw last week, to Rhys ap Thomas's disgust. As we heard, the Welsh had been living under draconian laws that restricted the lives of Welsh people in their own country. Henry didn't repeal these laws wholesale, but he granted charters enfranchising certain Welsh people, not all. So in 1504, which is quite late on, I mean, he's been on the throne for quite some time in 1504, a charter was granted to the people of Merionethshire and Carnarvonshire, so they could own land and offices in England and Wales. And over the next 4 years, a few charters will grant these rights to disparate part of Wales. This was more than any other recent king had given Wales.
Not a lot, though.
Not a lot, and he did charge £2,000 a charter.
Oh, jeez.
He didn't lose out by it.
No.
But in the decades following Henry's death, he was seen as the saviour of the Welsh people. He was seen, quote, as a Moses who delivered us from bondage, unquote.
Well, if you do consider the state they were in before he became king, for the entirety of the War of the Roses, he really did make a huge change just by giving them stability.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But that was the case of all the country, wasn't it?
Yes.
But really, as far as Wales could look at themselves as being special,
they weren't.
Not so very much. Following Bosworth, several Welshmen were rewarded for their support. Jasper, obviously. And Henry made an exception to his rule about not raising people up to be too powerful. Jasper was weighed down with titles and positions and properties.
Yeah, but he was the most trustworthy of all of them. He'd kept Henry alive for years, of course.
Yeah. David Owen, Henry's illegitimate uncle. He was also very well rewarded. And also Hugh Conway, who became Keeper of the Great Wardrobe, Lord Treasurer of Ireland, and Lord Treasurer of Calais, which was where we first met him.
And the Keeper of the Wardrobe, people may think that sounds ridiculous, but they were essentially in charge of so much money. All the clothing, all the fabric, all the jewelry, all of that was in that wardrobe. I mean, Queen Elizabeth had an entire building dedicated just to her dresses.
That's a little
ridiculous, isn't it?
Even the Herbert family did well out of Henry's reign. Walter Herbert sent Henry a hawk every August. I don't know why he needed one every August. What happened to the one he got last August?
Yeah.
Not looking after them properly. He needs a decent hawk looker after, doesn't he? He needs Lambert Simnor.
Cadgers?
Was
it a cadger?
Yeah. Remember. Many other Welshmen were suddenly able to improve their lot quite considerably. And a look at Henry's accounts, carefully documented by John Heron, he gave his Welsh employees a bonus on St David's Day. I don't know whether he gave the English ones a bonus on St George's and the Scottish ones a bonus on St Andrew's, but he definitely did the Welsh.
Okay.
And that was even towards the end of his reign, when he didn't generally dole out money if he didn't have to. And at Henry's funeral, a quarter of the guards were Welsh, and at least 35 Welshmen were involved with the funeral arrangements. Mind you, probably hundreds of people were involved in it, and 35 might not have been a huge percentage. However, in a 100 Merry Tales written in 1526, quote, "The advent to the throne of a prince of Pembroke British blood had led to a great scramble for places of profit among the taffy-hood, and to the try saying that now, and to the migration of considerable numbers to London, where their gaucheries laid them open to ridicule, and their predatory tastes to chastisement," unquote. So that implies that although more Welshmen got positions of responsibility, they were not fully accepted by the English at court.
Yeah.
If Henry would have done more if he hadn't died when he did, we can't tell. But Henry VIII wasn't particularly interested in Wales. I think it might have ended up being a bit of an albatross for him, I think, mightn't it? Probably barely been there. I'm not even sure if he ever went to Wales. But Thomas Cromwell brought Wales entirely into the English system, and that was largely because of the break from Rome. Henry VIII wanted to be the ultimate legal authority in all his lands. So this law was passed by Parliament without any involvement by the Welsh, of course. But by default, the laws which made the Welsh second-class citizens were abolished right across Wales. So now the whole country was under English law, but there couldn't be any double standards. Although, having said that, some saw this as debasing the Welshness of Wales. We don't want to be English, we just don't want to be second-class citizens. And it seemed a pity to me that it was a byproduct of Henry VIII's policies that improved life for the Welsh, rather than his father's hand. Because Henry VII had a lot to thank the Welsh for. Without them, he'd have definitely lost Bosworth, even if he'd made it there. And I couldn't help feeling that he owed them something. And that's the end.
Yeah, and Henry VIII doesn't do anything for the Welsh at all. He doesn't identify as Welsh, I don't think.
Well, he did do something for them, but he didn't really notice it, because Cromwell...
Did it?
He might have thought, Oh, well, apparently it's quite good for the Welsh. All right, fine.
Okay, fine. Do it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, carry on. I do get the money, don't I? I get the money from the monastery. Right, that's okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, we're good. Okay.
Ooh, cynical. Sure, he was a lovely man.
Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah, we went right back to the beginning there, but at least we knew some of the people in it this time, whereas they're complete strangers to us when we did it last time round.
The first time, yeah.
Okay.
We'll see you next time.
For something else.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye.